This is Sky News at 2, the headlines. Theresa May attempts to avoid Brexit mutiny from her cabinet as Jeremy Corbyn tells Sky News he believes a transition period will be extended.
It's not set in stone, but it's talked around for 2 years.
Would you be happy for it to be longer?
I've got a feeling it might go beyond that.
And would you be happy with that?
Also this morning, paramedics are to be given body cameras to help protect them from violent attacks. Four-time Tour de France champion Chris Froome is reportedly blocked from competing in this year's race. Polls open in Mexico's biggest ever election. 120 firefighters try to contain the blaze across the moors as high winds and extremely dry weather continue to fuel the flames. In Thailand, the search intensifies as time runs out to find 12 missing children and their football coach trapped in a cage. Very good afternoon to you. 30 Conservative MPs have written to Theresa May warning that they won't accept any extension of the Brexit transition period. But in an interview with Sky's Sophie Ridge, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has predicted that is precisely what will happen.
We proposed a transition period in the first place. That was a Labour proposal. And
Are you happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Theresa May is facing pressure to stand up to Brussels. The letter signed by 30 of her party's MPs says in order to satisfy this result and uphold our promise to the British people, after our formal departure on the 29th of March 2019, we will not accept an extension of the transition period beyond the 31st of December 2020. And the letter goes on to say our departure must be absolute. We must not remain entangled within the EU's institutions if this restricts our ability to exercise our sovereignty as an independent nation. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Westminster for us now. John, how have people reacted to this letter?
Well, this is a critical week for the Prime Minister, the heart of Remain. This is the background to the build-up to this big summit at Chequers on Friday. And, of course, Mr Corbyn is now trying to push the agenda by backing the extension of the transition deadline. And that is going to provoke a real split in the Conservative Party.
OK, John, thank you. Well, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has told Sky News that Theresa May's promise to increase spending on the NHS by £20 billion doesn't make any difference in the immediate future. He told Sky's Sophie Ridge that austerity was costing lives, but couldn't say how a Labour government would increase investment beyond their first year in power.
Health.
A GP, 12 to 14 years to train a consultant. We've got nursing pressures right across the health service. So we've got to sync up the money with the workforce with the improvements.
Paramedics will begin body cameras as part of new measures to protect NHS staff from violence and to prosecute people who attack them. More than 15% of NHS workers say they've experienced physical violence from patients or their families in the past year. Our correspondent Dan Whitehead has this report.
En route to yet another 999 call-out. Dan Whitehead, Sky News.
And we'll be marking the 70th birthday of the NHS with special coverage all of this week, presenting sunrise from different parts of the health service every day as we examine its future. And you can keep in touch using the hashtag NHS70 or tell us about your experiences of the NHS using the hashtag MyNHSStory. And on Wednesday, Dermot Murnaghan will be presenting a special hour-long debate on the future of the health service live from a central London hospital. That's NHS Fit for the Future at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, and that's here on Sky News. Four-time Tour de France champion Chris Froome has reportedly been blocked from competing in this year's race. The Team Sky cyclist is awaiting a decision in the case of an adverse drugs test. Olivia Kinsley joins me to discuss this in a bit more detail. So what exactly does this mean for Chris Froome going forward then?
So this is a pretty major development in what has been a saga involving Chris Froome that's been running for some months now. Just to give you the background, back in August and September last year, he took part in a race called the Vuelta a España. It's a race in Spain. It takes place over 3 weeks, and he took part and won it. It later emerged that during that race, he'd undergone a urine sample, which had returned what's called an adverse analytical finding for a drug called salbutamol. Salbutamol is not a banned substance. It's a drug that's taken commonly for asthma, but it's only allowed in certain limited dosages under cycling's rules, and it emerged that Chris Froome's sample had returned double the amount of that drug that was allowed. Now, since then, he's been being investigated by the UCI, which is cycling's governing body. He has continued to compete during that time. He won the Giro d'Italia in May, but now it's emerged that, or reportedly emerged, that the organisers of the Tour de France, which is due to begin just this coming Saturday, have actually blocked him from joining the lineup. The organisers are called Amaury Sport Organisation, and it's being reported in a French newspaper, Le Monde, that they're doing this in order to partly protect the race's image. Now, there is speculation that Team Sky is going to appeal this decision. They have simply issued a very short statement saying, "We are confident that Chris will be riding the Tour, as we know he has done nothing wrong," and they're saying they're not commenting any further at this time. Chris Froome has always maintained that he's done nothing wrong, very much protesting his innocence. He has, of course, won the Tour de France 4 times. He would be the defending champion this year, so he will absolutely want to compete. British fans will certainly be wanting him to compete, but there are now huge question marks over whether he will be able to.
OK, Olivia, thank you. Now, dozens of fire crews are trying to control what they say is a rapidly developing and aggressive fire on Moorland in Lancashire. The situation at Winter Hill in Bolton became a major incident yesterday when 2 large fires merged. Well, fire crews and the army are fighting fires in separate locations on the Moorland, and the fire on Saddleworth Moor was the first to start a week ago today. On Thursday, fires started at Winter Hill and Scout Road, and yesterday those 2 fires came together due to increasing wind speed. Well, Lisa Dowd has the very latest from Winter Hill in Bolton.
Here's the big problem, it's the wind. All it takes is a tiny little firebrand to travel maybe 500, 1,000 metres across this moorland, and it just inflames yet another section. This is what yesterday, drawing people to them. If that happens today, they are not going to be very happy, and unless there's a break in the weather, they're going to be here for days, possibly even weeks.
Now, we just want to bring you some breaking news. The Norfolk police are saying that a young girl has died in the town of Gorleston near Great Yarmouth. This is, of course, in Norfolk, and this is because a young child was thrown, apparently from a bouncy castle. She was taken to James Paget Hospital, but sadly died shortly after. This all happened at 11:15, and there is now an investigation underway with the Health and Safety Executive, the local authority and police. So that's that breaking news that sadly a young girl has died after allegedly being thrown off a bouncy castle. Well, let's take a look at some of the day's other news, shall we now? 4 people have been stabbed at a music festival in East London. Police were called to the Garage Nation event in Hainault Forest Country Park at around 7:30 yesterday evening. 2 of the injured men were airlifted to hospital. One of them might have life-changing injuries. Nobody yet has been arrested. Train operator Govia Thameslink will reportedly be stripped of its franchise and forced to give passengers free travel for a month if services aren't improved within a fortnight. Well, the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, is believed to be drawing up plans to run the Thameslink and Great Northern Line by a government-controlled company if services don't improve by July the 15th. More than half of England's council leaders say they'd like income tax to be increased to help solve the funding crisis in social care. A survey by the Local Government Association also suggested that most of them didn't want council tax to rise, saying the shortfall in money should be filled by the UK government. A young Australian woman has been lucky to keep her finger after a shark pulled her into the water as she attempted to hand feed it. Melissa Brunning was on a yacht and tried to feed up to 4 tawny nurse sharks in northwestern Australia. Now, it's been a week since the search began to find 12 schoolboys and their football coach who went missing inside a cave in Thailand. Divers say they've reached several kilometres inside the flooded Tam Luang cave complex, and now Australian police and military personnel, as well as British and American experts, are involved in the operation. Our senior correspondent Lisa Holland has the latest from Chiang Rai province.
Well, it's just started raining here again, which is an absolute disaster for the search and rescue teams trying to reach the boys who they believe are trapped inside the cave.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, the very latest from the World Cup, including the England camp as they prepare for Tuesday's last 16 match. Welcome back. Let's get a check on all the day's sport now with Rob.
It'll stay up on its own, you know.
This programme is brought to you by Vitality Health and Life Insurance. Getting active brings its own rewards.
Told you.
Good afternoon. Lewis Hamilton's made a strong start at the Austrian Grand Prix. There is a Mercedes that's just crashed out of the Austrian Grand Prix, but it's not Lewis Hamilton, it's his teammate Valtteri Bottas. So Hamilton leads, Verstappen second and Kimi Räikkönen third. The whole race is over on Sky Sports F1. We're back later.
This bowl needs a top-up.
Now, it's been a lovely weekend. Let's see if that weather's set to continue.
Calling out around the world. Are you ready for a brand new beat? Let me see you dance.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
High pressure will keep things settled for the start of July, but there will be a few thunderstorms in the southwest today. A new Met Office thunderstorm warning has been issued for central, southern England, the West Country and South Wales. Expect torrential rain, hail and gusty winds in places there, with local flooding also possible. It'll be another very warm afternoon, hot and humid in the south, but there will be a refreshing breeze. There'll be plenty of sunshine again, but southern and western parts will see more cloudy than recently. Southwest Britain will see thunderstorms. The Hebrides and Northwest Ireland can expect a little rain too, but most other places, and pleased to say, will stay dry. Southern Britain will be at risk of heavy and perhaps thundery showers overnight, but they will become isolated. There'll also be some low cloud around, especially for northern and eastern Scotland. It'll stay warm for most. Monday then will be largely sunny and dry once isolated heavy showers in the south fade out. It will stay pretty warm, but not quite as hot as the weekend. High pressure will keep much of the week settled.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Theresa May to stand firm on Brexit. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says he believes the transition period will be extended. Paramedics are to be given body cameras to help protect them from violent attacks and help prosecute people who attack them. Dozens of fire crews are trying to control what they say is a rapidly developing and aggressive fire on Moorland in Lancashire, which became a major incident yesterday. People in Mexico are voting in the country's biggest ever election, with 88 million people eligible to cast their ballot. The populist candidate, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, is tipped to take the presidency after declaring he'll quash corruption and spiralling crime. Well, our US correspondent Greg Milam is in Mexico City and sent this report.
If every election is really all about the money in voters' pockets for Mexico City.
We're just going to show you a live shot now. This is Andrés Obrador. He is waiting for the gates to open so he can cast his vote. Of course, those gates likely to open any time now, but that is a live shot. Let's get a bit more detail on this now, shall we? I'm joined from central London by Dr. Sophia Collignon-Delmar, a lecturer in political communication at Royal Holloway University. Very good afternoon to you. As we were hearing there in Greg's report, this is an election that's been marred by violence. Why have things become quite so volatile this time round?
So, hi, hello, how are you? Thank you very much for inviting me today. Well, this has been labeled as one of the most violent elections in Mexico, and also is sparkling a lot of attention in the media and among the public, as more than 100 candidates have been already killed during the campaign. This is a very high number, considering the fact that Mexico transited to democracy in 2000 and now is considered, even though it has a crisis of violence, it is considered a mainly peaceful country, or a country that is not in civil conflict. And therefore it's very high, or we think it's very high, the number of candidates that have been murdered this time. But also it has been labeled as one of the biggest elections in the country, as not only the presidential seat is in it's going to be held by a new person, but also because more than 3,000 different positions are going to be elected today.
We're just looking at some live pictures in Mexico City at the moment. AMLO, as he's known in Mexico, is the front runner. Is this likely to be third time lucky for him, do you think?
I think so. It will be extremely unlikely if he loses this time, as all the polls put him with close to 50% in the preferences among the population. So it will be really, really weird if he doesn't win. However, I don't think he will win with a large margin of majority that a lot of polls are expecting or are showing now.
Clearly corruption and the economy, which he says he will fight, are big things and deciding points for the electorate. What do you think are the other main issues that really concern people living in Mexico?
So it's, I will say that it's security, the main issue that is concerning the population, but also the lack of social mobility. So a lot of people are used to live to their own. The country is heavily unequal. However, the lack of social mobility actually make a lot of people despair about what will be the future for them. And it's a general sentiment of being fed up with the current situation of the country, not only about political corruption, as you mentioned, and the economy, but also security. It's, I think, one of the main concerns.
We're just looking at the pictures now live from Mexico City, but while we're doing so, just talk to us about what Greg Milam, our correspondent, was talking about in his report, that there has been a lot of fraudulent activity. Can you tell us a bit more detail about that and how it's manifested itself?
Yes, acts of electoral corruption have been present in the last elections. As I mentioned before, the country just transitioned to democracy in the year 2000. However, in every single federal election, we have been receiving claims that the election have been corrupted and there is a lot of vote buying. So who is buying the votes is something that is contended, as reports are now so widespread that it's very likely that it's all the main parties that are engaging in this type of practices, and not only the PRI, which is the governing party at the moment, even though, as I mentioned, it's not a new thing. But how it will really damage the outcome, we will see, because if López Obrador is the winner, it's very unlikely that he will, as he did in previous elections, will claim that the elections were so fraudulent that, that he will try to impugn them.
OK, Dr. Sofia Collignon-Delmar, thank you ever so much for your expertise and your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much and have a good day.
Well, let's return now to our coverage of Chris Froome and the reports that the four-time Tour de France champion has been barred from this year's race by organisers. However, Team Sky says they are confident that Froome will take part in the race, as they know he's not done anything wrong. Well, I'm joined now to discuss this from Lewis in Sussex by the clinical psychologist at Canterbury Christchurch University, Dr. John McGowan. Very good afternoon to you. Organisers have said that this decision has been made to protect the race's image. Is it the right decision?
Personally, I don't think so. I'm struggling to get too excited about it. Having said that, ASO, the organisation who run the Tour de France, who incidentally are by far the biggest commercial player in world cycling, they can disinvite people, including really very big names, and they have done it before, not for a while, but they've done it before. And their concern is, reputational damage to the race, to the sport. So they're within their rights to at least try and disinvite him, basically.
Surely, though, you're innocent until proven guilty, and in Chris Froome's case, the decision has not been made yet.
The decision hasn't been made, and he has every right to race. I mean, this has been rumbling for months, since he won the Tour of Spain, the Vuelta a España last year, and was found with an excessive level of salbutamol asthma medication in his urine. And it's a kind of mid-level serious offence. He's unlikely to be stripped of anything that he's won subsequently. If he's found guilty, he could be stripped of that Tour of Spain title and handed a short ban. And usually these things are confidential. Usually you have the right to defend yourself. You have to prove that you're innocent, actually. You really give them serious grounds to think that you're innocent, because he is over a line. But normally these things are supposed to be confidential. The problem that Froome has got is that it's been leaked. and thus now for a number of months this possibility of him being asked not to go to the Tour de France, which in cycling terms is huge, because he's about to race to try and win a 5th Tour de France, which is to tie the record with some of the greats of the sport. And legally he has the right to race. We thought a few weeks ago that the Tour might try and stop him, and then all that seemed to go off the boil. But it's a week to go before they start, and they've decided that they're going to try.
Well, exactly. And as you say, you know, he's won the Tour de France, 4 times now. He's an incredible cyclist. What impact will this have on the race if he doesn't compete?
Well, I mean, in sporting terms, it opens up the race. He's the dominant rider with the dominant team. He's won another big race, the Tour of Italy this year, so it's a moot point if he's tired out or not. But usually he and his team manage these things quite well. Well, I think also they would cry foul. I mean, Team Sky, his team will clearly cry foul and try and contest this. Whether they've really got the grounds to or not, I don't know. As I say, ASO, who organise the Tour de France, are seriously big players in global sport, and they have the resources to, you know, back up this decision. So even a team as powerful as Froome's team may not necessarily be able to question it. And I say they have successfully indicated in the past that they didn't. There was a rider called Tom Bonin in 2008 or 9, I can't remember which, who had a cocaine positive, and they indicated that they didn't want him to go to the race. Having said that, he didn't particularly want to ride the race, so they were prepared to go even with quite big names. They were prepared to go up against quite big names and quite big teams. I mean, there's a lot going on at the moment. People saying that, you know, Froome shouldn't race. He should have stepped out. He should have, you know, he should not be asserting his right to race. Oh, there's so many different opinions on that. My own view, I think he's an athlete. He's still at the top. He's in his 30s. He probably doesn't have that long to go. At quite that level, I think it's a big ask actually to say to somebody, well, don't race even though you're allowed. Just don't. It's been leaked. It's not your fault, but don't race. I think that's a hard ask, I think.
OK, Dr. John McGowan, thank you for your time. Appreciate your thoughts.
Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Authorities in Thailand say their country is becoming the new dumping ground for the world's illegal electronic waste. Police officers say shipments have been flowing into Thailand since January, when China banned so-called e-waste imports. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Siobhan Robbins sent this report.
In the countryside outside Bangkok, these officers are searching for smugglers, their scar on the future. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News in Thailand.
This is Sky News. Coming up, why one part of the country is bucking the trend of falling numbers of puffins. Welcome back. Now, puffin numbers have been falling around the world for several years, but on a small island off the coast of Pembrokeshire, the much-loved seabirds are holding their own. And now new research, partly funded by Sky Ocean Rescue, is being carried out on Skomer Island to find out why puffins are thriving, in the hope that it could help to stop the bird's global decline. Phil Edwards has the details.
First, the good news. Puffins are thriving on this remote island off the coast of Wales.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up at 3, we'll have more on the death of that young girl after reports that